Hafa everyone. Guahusi Monaeka Flores, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Fanachu. Again, my name is Monaeka Flores. I'm a member of both Prutehi Litekyan Tidian and Independent Guam. And I'm really honored today to be hosting this incredible panel of young activists who took part in the scoping meetings in the previous week, attended most of those scoping meetings, if not all of them, and also protested at the scoping meetings. And so we're going to hear from them today. And I'd like to ask for each one of them to introduce themselves. And let's see, Ally, can we start with you?
So, hi, my name is Ally. I'm a 22-year-old student at UOG, and I'm a part of Prutehi Litekyan. Sorry.
Sol, you want to go next?
Sure. So, buenas and happy day, everybody. Naon si Maria Sol Dueñas Marques. I'm 18 years old. I'm a student at UOG, and I'm a community member of Prutehi Litekyan and Independent Guam.
Noah?
Hey everyone, my name's Noah Austin. I'm 30 years old, not so young as everyone else. Father of four, and I'm with the Independent Guahan, Prutehi Litekyan, and if anyone else is out there working hard for the people, I'll work with you too.
Mega Mamasi, Tora Hamza, thank you all so much for joining the panel tonight. I thought we could start first with asking each of you, what were some of the reasons why you decided to come out to the protests last week, or sorry, to the scoping meetings last week, and why you decided to join both as an attendee of the scoping meetings, but also join in the protests for the plans for the missile defense system for Guam, or the EIAMD, the Enhanced Integrated Air Missile Defense System. So what were some of the reasons why you decided to come out last week? Let's see, whoever likes to go first. Sol, should we start with you?
Oh, sure. I'm so Mawala. I never want to be the first one to answer the question, but some of the reasons why I came out to these scoping meetings is because I wanted to be present with everybody who was there protesting against what was happening. And I also wanted to learn some more about the way that the military was proposing these developments to the people, what they're going to be telling people. And, because it's kind of our way of like, when you figure out what they're telling them, it can give you more material, you know what I mean? Especially to support the community and educating them more, because when we were there learning about, when they were, I guess, trying to teach us about the missile defense, there was a lot of different like terms they use and phrases that can kind of misdirect you into thinking this is kind of something better than it is. So yeah, I just wanted to be there to learn more about how we can support and educate our people in handling this really heavy topic.
Thank you so much. Ally, how about you? What were some of your motivations for coming out last week?
So, I wanted to go because personally, I like to educate myself on all viewpoints as to further strengthen mine. I also, since I used to be an education major, I learned how to take these tough topics and kind of make it a bit more simple so more people understand, as they understand that not a lot of people have access to higher education, as it is a bit elitist with how much it costs. Also, because I'm young, this is my future, and given the choice of staying home and just ignoring it or actually trying to do something to guarantee myself a better future, I will gladly take the second choice.
Great, thank you so much. And Noah, how about you? Can you share some of your motivations for coming last week?
I went last week just to protest because it seems to me that it's this whole stuff with China is like just another chapter of our long history of U.S. imperialism. And yeah, I'm sick of it, tired of it, not looking to hand it down to my kids without having done, anything at all, you know what I'm saying? So that was it.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. And actually, I think that's a really good place to start Maybe that's something we can start with there, because so as we were talking about these scoping meetings that took place last, on August 3rd, 4th, and 5th, right? There was one at the Hilton, one at the Micronesia Mall, and one at the Agate Community Center. And this was for the Enhanced Integrated Air and Missile Defense System, or the EIAMD, the Guam Missile Defense System. And we're in what's called the scoping period, where the military is sort of checking off the boxes, saying like, look, we've gone out into the community, we've given them some information, and now we're also collecting public comments. And the deadline for public comments is actually coming up on August 18th. But Noah and Ally and Sol also touch on, this idea about kind of coming from generations that have inherited a legacy passed down from war survivors, or families that have suffered the tragedies of war, very real tragedies, and very close to us, right? There are grandparents or our great grandparents' experiences, and we've learned from some of those in our families, in our family stories. And in the summer, we commemorate a lot of the tragedies that happened. There's a lot of ceremonies to honor our war dead, to honor, for instance, the massacre sites where folks were murdered or forced to labor, or who suffered many other harms from both the Japanese Imperial Army occupation of the island, as well as the violent American recapture that happened, right? And so I think that's a good place to start, coming from this time of year, summertime, July and August, where we have a lot of these ceremonies, a lot of these commemorations around war, and we remember these war stories, and knowing that war happened here in our home, in our island, and recognizing the potential risk for war again. I think that's a good place to start. What are some of your thoughts about that, and how, if you could just speak to that a little bit more, kind of growing up, all of us growing up here with these stories, with this legacy, and now sort of being positioned to be a site for war again. Who would like to go first? Let's see, Noah, maybe we could start with you this time. Do you mind going first? Thank you.
Okay. So growing up here, World War II is how I learned it is the Japanese came, the US saved us, and the US were the heroes, and every other war that the US was in were the good guys fighting the bad guys. It's just black and white, cut and dry. And then when I just recently, in the past maybe like 2.5 years or so, I've been coming to learn that that's not necessarily the case. And a lot of the times it's actually the exact opposite of that. And almost all these recent modern day wars, like there's no stress in the interests of the rich, the powerful, the corporations, the established powers of the corporate state, it seems to me. And I'm just pissed off, having found out that I was fed a bunch of lies, and that's how I feel these days. Just mad about it, trying to figure out how to get other people on board, like what you're saying about a peace protest and all that, because seems like the government, our politicians, they're always down for war. They're always ready to fund war, do whatever it takes. But when it comes to peace, there's always excuses why it can be done. When it comes to the people, there's excuses why they can be put first. And I've just had enough.
Thank you so much for that, Noah. You brought up some really good points up. First of all, that there are corporations that get very rich off of the war industry and making weapons for war. And you're right. While war is making people rich, there's issues with, where we can instead spend money to create genuine security, right? Whether it's you're bringing up a lot of really good points there. And also the dominant rhetoric that there's a winner in war, and that it's usually the United States and they're the good guys. And so I really appreciate you, bringing that to the conversation. Thank you so much. Ally, how about you? What are what are some of your thoughts about being a descendant of a people who've survived war in our own homeland and what it means now in this context today?
So, of course, I have my great-grandparents who survived war, but I also come from a family where a lot of them are in the military. So not only have my great-grandparents lived through war, my grandpas have as well, my uncles, my aunties, my cousins, even the people that I've dated. It's touched every single aspect of my life, having to say goodbye to these people that I care about and not knowing if they'll come home safely. And it's really messed with my head. I mean, the people that you care about, they just leave and you don't know if they're going to come back because of war. And you know that at the end of the day, the US cares more about victory than their individual soldiers. And I hated going through it. I hate going through it right now. I'm actually waiting for my mom to come back for her deployment. And I don't want anybody else to go through that because it's honestly terrible. I don't want my friends or my family or any of my other loved ones to ever experience war or to experience what it's like to have to send off someone that you care about so much and not know if they're going to come back.
Thank you, Ally. Thank you so much for sharing that personal perspective and your family's lived experiences. How about you, Sol? Could you please share your thoughts with us?
Well, growing up as a descendant of war in our own homeland, it's really difficult to talk about it as a young person because obviously it's never something that I have experienced. I wasn't around during the Second World War to experience, that violence and that tragedy. And I've had conversations with my nana before where she'll tell me about how like she feels like this attitude of people now is because, they didn't know what it was like at the time. And that's the truth. If we were in a good state of mind, if we weren't traumatized by war, in the 40s, it would have been a lot easier for us to take a stand against the things that were all happening. But because we were so tired and exhausted and felt so defeated in anguish, it was kind of easy to let these things kind of come all over us until they culminated into the culture that we have now, where we feel like we have an obligation towards America because they saved us, you know what I mean? And now because of that, we look at it now and Guam is celebrated as a patriotic island because we have the most enrollment in the military per square capita. And
all right, thank you so much. Those are really, really great points. And for me, in my family, I grew up with the stories of the experiences of my grandparents and the things that they witnessed, the things that they had to go through, which were really quite difficult. And so it's very fresh, and I feel like war is an evil that you can never unsee, and a lot of it still is present, whether it's showing up in some of the violence that continues in our community and the poverty, in the ways that families have been ripped away from their lands. So after World War II, a lot of people lost their lands from eminent domain, and that's a trauma that a lot of families have never healed from. And now we're watching the lands that were once in our families being occupied by the US military, being cleared, destroyed, or contaminated. And, we're watching more land possibly being taken and destroyed also for the missile defense system. And so that was one of the concerns that folks had, in wanting to come out to the protests last week, right? That's some of the critique is that the US missile defense system, or rather the Guam missile defense system, is going to require more land, and it's going to expand the current footprint of the military. Right now, they occupy it close to 30%. And so this will increase that footprint. They've already cleared a great deal of land for the construction of the live fire training range complex, the new Marine base, the urban warfare training range, and now they'll clear more land for the 20 sites around the island. That clearing will impact ancestral burials. It will impact rare and endangered species that we've already seen a great loss of because of the recent military construction the operations. And then there are many other risks, right? Some of which you all mentioned, whether it's the nuclear microreactors that might be used, might be Guam's first land-based nuclear power generation, or whether it's ancestral burials being desecrated again, or more land being taken, or even the risk for water contamination, because these sites, with the clearing and with their operations, they do pose risk for water contamination. What are some of your biggest concerns around the missile defense system? If you can share, what are some of the things you fear the most, or what are the things you're worried about the most? Or even if you have questions, what are the things you have questions about that are unclear to you? For instance, for me, at the 20 sites, we don't know, what the details are for each of the 20 sites. And so we don't know which of those sites are going to include missile launchers, and how close those sites are to the villages, what the impact could be to the villages where, those sites are being hosted. So those are some of the questions that I have, right? But if you could name maybe one fear, one concern, or one question you have about the missile defense system, that would be great. Ally, is it okay if we start with you? What's one fear, question, or concern you have about the missile defense system?
So I was actually talking about this with Sol at the second day of the scoping meetings, and she posted what I said on her story. My biggest, well, not my biggest, one of my concerns is how this goes directly against the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People. So Article 30 states that the military shall not conduct any activities on our lands. Article 29 says that we have the right to conserve our environment. Article 26 says that we have the right to our land and how we use it and protect it. Article 18 states that we should be participating in all decision-making concerning ourselves. Article 10 says that we shall not be forcibly removed from our lands, which most likely would happen, seeing that they want to build some of these missile bases outside of federally owned lands. Article 8 says that our culture shall not be destroyed. And Article 3 says that we have the right to self-determination. Seeing that Guam is one of the last colonies left in the world, we very much do not have any rights at all. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he said that at the rate in which the United States is using Guam, they should change the United States flag to a picture of a Chamorro man holding a US flag, because that's how much we participate. We have one of the highest rates of people joining the military. They use up to almost 30% of our land. We do not own ourselves. We do not have self-determination. We have no control of our home. And that's sad. I mean, not a lot of places can say that. It's like we're just going to have this missile base that we don't want and be forced to be part of a war that we do not want to be in. We are being forced to be a first strike community. And who wants that? Other than the military, of course, for profit.
Thank you for bringing up so many good points there. All of the issues around the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but you're absolutely right. Expanded militarization definitely impacts our process for decolonization, for self-determination, for choosing our political future. And I really appreciate your reference to, you didn't say it, but I'm just going to say the territorial clause, which in the Constitution defines that we as people and land are property of the United States. We're not fully incorporated citizens with the full protections of the Constitution. So I really appreciate you bringing up that point. I also really appreciate, you pointing out that we do not consent to a lot of the things that are happening. It's really with the lack of our free, prior, and informed consent that this military expansion has occurred and continues to happen. And now with this new missile defense system. So these are really excellent points, Ally. Thank you so much for that. Let's see, who would like to go next? Noah, how about you? Would you like to go next? What are some of your biggest concerns, questions, fears about the missile defense system?
Okay, my biggest fear and concern about the missile defense system is just the continued march towards whatever war the U.S. feels will benefit its geopolitical position. And that just goes hand in hand with this continued total disregard for human life, whether it's us here on Guam or the citizens in the States or the soldiers they're sending to die to pad their own pockets. Like, it's just, I feel like most of my answers will just come down to U.S. imperialism and how we need to tear it down because it's too much already. Don't get us nothing good. Ever since, nothing good.
I really appreciate that, Noah, because you're absolutely right. One of the biggest risks, of course, is that we are being made a target for war. And Ally said that too. Being a first strike community, we've been called the tip of the spear for many years, but now, that's it. The tip of the spear is the first the first that gets broken and bloody in battle, like Maget has always said, and but now being a first strike community, we're going to be the first place of attack. And as you mentioned, Noah, I really appreciate it setting us up to be a place where the United States projects its force in the region, projects its military might and imperialism from our place of living and being is a problem. Using Guam, using our islands to be the place to push American imperialism in the region and basically set us up for war and conflict. So I really do appreciate that, Noah. Thank you so much. Ally, you wanted to add to these points before we turn it over to Sol?
Oh, I just remembered I need to send you a picture, but recently I actually went to the Navy submarine ball, and up on the screen they projected a picture of the Guam seal on the tip of a spear. They're really taking this seriously, but it's so bad. I don't know why they do this. That's all I wanted to bring up. It's so bad.
Oh no, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the visual, seeing our own iconography, right? Seeing our own cultural visual vocabulary being co-opted for military messaging is a serious problem. And I'd like to talk to you more about that since you've had a very personal experience with that. But before we get into that, so I'd like to take it to you.
Sana Maasi for that. And I saw that picture. Ally sent it to me before, and it was so scary. Like, they had it projected on a huge screen in this ballroom, and like everybody was like looking down. It was really serious, and it was very, very scary. But some of the concerns I had were how, like, the Environmental Protection Agency, there's all these different agencies within the group, and they all say that they're dedicated to looking into different issues like historical preservation and environmental issues, and compiling them into the study to see what the impact of all these things would be. And every time I would listen to their presentation, the thing I would ask them in the end was, if you find that this development could compromise, any kind of ethical code, or, could potentially be built on land that, has historical significance to it. Because honestly, like, let's be real, all of the land has historical significance to it. And they're building 20 sites. Like, if you guys should find that this should compromise the convenience of building this, like, how can we trust you that you guys aren't going to, do anything that goes against our wishes? And every time I'd ask this, the same thing they'd always say is, oh, well, we can't do anything that's illegal. But it's like, yeah, you can, because you have, and you continue to do it. Somebody will write a case against the US military because of all the laws they break, like every single year, but they'll still get looked over just because the United States military is such a powerful force that all these other countries are so nervous to even like try to stand up to them. And of course, there's always going to be the same point that everybody's been bringing up, that it emphasizes war on us. Just because we built a defense system doesn't mean, it's just going to be another thing, an arms race, similar to the Cold War. We've seen it play out in history time and time again, where countries will get into these competitions to see who can make these different kind of systems until eventually, both people lose, because both lands and economies are destroyed by this inevitable escalation towards war. So, yeah.
I really appreciate you really focusing on, the historical areas that are going to be impacted. And also that there's a pattern. There's a pattern of destruction that we've seen, and a pattern of the military breaking federal law over and over again, whether it's the Endangered Species Act, whether it's the Clean Water Act, whether it's RCRA or NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. I appreciate you bringing all this up. It's a pattern that we've seen where And in some cases, the law is even skewed. It's not even, they don't have to follow the law to the letter of the law. They get to skew it in certain agreements. They get permitted to take a certain or kill and destroy a certain number of endangered species. You know, they're permitted to destroy historic properties if they have a mitigation plan. And you're right, Sol, there's a pattern where we've seen the laws being broken, the mitigation not being followed, and all kinds of destruction, and we suffer tremendously at those those consequences. And I also want to talk about what you're talking, one of your other points, where this shift from the defensive to the offensive. And you're absolutely right. This system is being sold to us as a way to defend us and keep us safe, but it's also setting us up in the offensive side, right? Because some of these sites because they're projecting missiles, they are literally becoming offensive as well as defensive, but also setting us up as a place to project power, like Noah was also saying as well, puts us on the side of the offensive rather than defensive. And so you're right, and how all of this has a long-term impact to the land and the economy. So you've all brought up some truly amazing points, and I'm pretty sure you're going to include those in your comments, and comments are due on August 18th, this Friday. And I think it's really important moment to mention that Prutehi Litekyan has put together a toolkit. We can put the link in the comments here, but we can also, it's also, the link is also available on our Instagram. And it's just got it's got tips for submitting comments. It's got great talking points, some of the points that have been discussed so far, and also a very long list of really great articles, some by the Pacific Center for Island Security, some by major news outlets like the New York Times, The Economist, and some like from special sort of think tanks that really focus on security issues and war, other think tanks other than the Pacific Center for Island Security, and one of which was a war study where in every scenario of the United States potentially entering into conflict with China over Taiwan, Guam is completely devastated in every single study. And so what you just talked about is so important, because we are impacted, we are attacked, because we are seen as a place of the offensive, not just the defensive. It's not just to protect us, it is to set us up to project force. So really good points, all of you. I think it's a good time now to sort of switch it to your experiences of attending the scoping meetings last week. So let's see, Sol and Ally, you went to all 3 scoping meetings. Noah, you went to 2 of the scoping meetings. And let's go ahead and maybe, Maget, if we can maybe get the video queued up, let's go ahead and start here with this video, because on the first day at the Hilton, you were all in attendance, and you very quietly and peacefully enter the hotel ballroom with your signs. You're not making any disturbances, and then you're asked to leave. Let's go ahead and play the video real quick. And if you can you can see they're calling the security guard. You're all just standing there very calmly, just holding up signs. I want to ask you, what is some of the messaging that they're telling you? As you can see here, this woman's asking you all to leave, and you've all very quickly respectfully comply. But I wanted to ask you, what is the message they're conveying, their reason for asking you to leave? And how does it feel in this moment to be at the scoping meeting with your messages for no war for the Marianas, to demilitarize Guam and Oceania, to stop making us a target for war? And what's going on here? Can we hear some of your reflections? Let's see, Ally, let's go ahead and start with you. Did you hear the instruction here? What was happening?
So this was my second time getting kicked out from a military protest. My first time was back in February, I believe, right? Yes, when
January, that's right.
January, when I was on this
renaming ceremony, we were kicked out.
That's right. I'm not sorry. So I've kind of grown used to this feeling where they say that they want free speech, but they only want free speech if you agree with them. Otherwise, they don't want opposing views around, because then people have the chance to educate themselves and the chance to possibly disagree with them. I mean, don't get me wrong, the people there were like nicer than the ones at the base renaming ceremony. They didn't have guns, so I felt like slightly safer, like, oh, I won't die this time. I like nothing will happen to me, but still, like, this is supposed to be an event for the community, for the public, and you're kicking us out for holding a sign that disagrees with you. Like, really? Are you serious right now? That, like, what happened to the First Amendment? Oh no, just I thought it was weird. I thought it was very hypocritical, personally.
Thank you so much, Ally. How about you, Noah?
I agree with what Ali was saying, how it's very hypocritical, but I feel that it's so unsurprising because American government is just hypocrisy, like when you think about it in terms of like the American people, and I'm talking about American, like, I don't know, like it's not like we're truly American here anyways, you know what I'm saying? But even in terms of the American people in the 50 states, like, there's nothing more un-American than the American government and the actions it takes and the consequences of those actions and who bears the brunt of the consequences. And it's like their standard operating procedure. They push their narrative. Anything that's counter to that is evil, is bad, or these are just some crazies, or just push them to the side. It's nothing. That's just how they roll, it seems.
No, I really appreciate what you're speaking to in terms of silencing, that there's a dominant message. And Ally, you spoke to this too. Anytime there's an opposing message that arises, there's a need to silence and erase that voice and that message. And so I really appreciate you both speaking to that. And you're right, Noah, like in silencing the opposition, it serves the agenda, which is to carry on, for things to be status quo. And so that's a really good point. So how about you? If you can share your thoughts on that experience of being removed, and what were some of the things you heard, or the things you felt in that moment?
Well, initially walking into the first day of the scoping meeting, I was immediately unsettled by kind of, they had this certain politeness that felt very ingenuine. The way they were all smiling at us and like waving us and greeting us, even though they knew why we were here, and it felt really strange and it felt really weird. And obviously it was like they were trying to make it seem like they were opening us to the community, like Ally was saying, like it's supposed to be open to the public, and they're promoting it as this like community outreach kind of event thing. But as soon as we started with our signs, and as soon as we not even like vocally opposing them, but just with the signs, very peacefully, not disruptive at all, in the corner, not even in anybody's face or anybody's way. We were out of their way, yet they still immediately had to remove us. And it was so serious, like they felt like the need to have a security person come in. And I don't know, yeah, to a certain extent I agree with Noah in that I wasn't very surprised by the way that they handled it. But one thing that really stuck out to me is how they continually tried to put on this kind of nice face. As we were walking out, as they were forcing us to leave, they were still waving at us and smiling at us and telling us, oh, thank you so much for coming out tonight. And it almost felt like satirical the way that they were telling us that. That made me angry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And then if I could ask you and Ally to talk about this, because then the next day you all three of you go to the mall, and you're all participating at the mall, and you have a similar experience where you're told there are no signs allowed in the space, you have to stay outside. And then you decide to go into the scoping meeting, and somebody in Joint Region decided to take a picture of you all and put it on their Instagram and actually tag Prutehi Litekyan in the story. What are your thoughts, on the first day being removed for protesting, for having signs with messaging, and then the next day your own pictures. Did you even know that someone was taking a picture of you and was going to use your image? Which we asked them to take it down, and they took it down they took it down actually afterward, but I mean, it was up for a good it was up for a minute, and they would have left it up if we didn't message them. But anyway, your thoughts on that experience, and what do you think? Sorry, you guys okay? So your thoughts on, your image being removed one day and then your image being used the next day. Tell me about it.
I'm sorry, you were kind of cutting out. Were you asking me to speak or Ally? I didn't catch
Either
that.
one of you. Either one of you could go first. So maybe you could go first. Yeah.
Okay. I can go first. Are you guys able to hear me okay? Just because you guys are kind of cutting out for a little bit for me.
We can hear you fine, but it's a little dark there. Is there any way we could get more light on your face? So
okay, wait, let me see if I could turn off my camera and that might work better.
No, because we need to see your face for the
Oh, good. Oh man, it works better when I turn off my camera. Okay.
We can hear you
here,
fine.
I'll just keep it on and
yeah.
Okay. Well, in the initial meeting, obviously they had us leave, and then in the second meeting, we were coming in and we wanted to walk around and just look at some of the presentations. There was one thing that I wanted to picture a little bit of terms to describe really simple words like deploy and like manage, like to define them, like we don't know what those words mean. I just thought it was interesting, and I want to get a picture of it and kind of just hear what these people had to tell us. And while we were doing that, someone was behind us, because you could see in the photo our backs were towards the camera, so we didn't even know that photo was up until later on my mom showed me that photo. You know, it's the same thing. It's like this surface level politeness. Like they're trying to make it seem like they're on our side, and even you're saying they're co-opting tomorrow language. They're like, do us mossy for coming out, like, girl, shut up, and just that experience was just so like, ugh, it's such just gross taste in my mouth, the way that they're trying to, like you said, co-opt this language, and as if literally 24 hours ago they didn't ask us to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sol. How about you, Ally? What are some of your thoughts about that?
So I am clearly no stranger to getting kicked out of military events, as we know. And I just found it funny, as Sol said, that they kicked us out the day before, and then they tried to use our pictures for publicity and stuff. I especially was not a fan of it since, number one, it was taken without my consent. Number two, I tend to dress very colorfully. People can recognize my outfits even if they don't see my face. Number three, when I was in high school, I was stalked by someone who is now in JRM. So when I saw that picture, I was just like, oh no. I just started freaking out, because I understand that I understand that I'm seen by the public because of things like this, and because of my major and other things such as previous jobs, since I have worked in jobs where they've used my face for advertising. It's just, at least then I was able to consent. And this time they just took my picture without even asking. Like, they wanted to use our culture with that while trying to destroy it. They wanted to use our image while kicking us out. Once again, very hypocritical of them. I did not appreciate it. Afterwards, before I found out that it was deleted, I went to the social media coordinator and I asked her if she could take it down, because I had a stalker and I like living, respectfully. But yeah, just overall, it really freaked me out. I tend to cope through humor, if you guys haven't noticed.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ally. And I'm sorry about, your experience with being stalked. And thank you very much for sharing that personal detail with us. It is unnerving and unsettling to know that somebody is taking a picture of you all and using it for, their messaging and to promote their optics without your knowledge or permission, but then furthermore, to know that you have a personal experience with someone who is a part of the agency that's doing that, that has been one that's been unsafe for you. So for many of those reasons, I deeply apologize and regret that that happened. And we did message them immediately and told them that they did not have any consent whatsoever to use that image. And we also pointed out the hypocrisy, that just the day before they asked the same young activists, protesters, to leave. And now as you're attending the scoping meeting as community members, they're using your image to, yes, co-opt the protest, co-opt the community, co-opt the messaging, the messages that we were bringing to those protests. So thank you very much, Ally, for sharing that. I know for sharing that so honestly, and thank you for your bravery. So, and all of you, you're also brave. Noah, how about you? If you want to comment too on that, you also attended at as a community member, aside from the protest, any differences that you want to talk about, or even in your observations about the optics, and being sort of used as a prop in some ways. What do you think?
I think, again, it's unsurprising. Any chance they get to be on some BS, they're going to go for it. Anything that will push their narrative, they're going to go for it. And it's like, it's a behemoth. And that's just how, it just gobbles up anything in the way. And that's just how they roll, And I was talking to someone at the mall, one of the environmental people. I know in conversation with her, even her, she's like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. I hear you, but this is just my job. Da 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 da. My job is to make sure everything on the environment is okay and we're doing it right. And it's like, man, it got me thinking how many of these people in there, it's not even, they are not the enemy, Whether they're just blinded by the propaganda, or maybe they're just in it for the money, but I don't know that any of these guys are high enough the ladder to really be the enemy, as opposed to just the agents of the empire. You know what I'm saying? So as much as irritating and infuriating they can be sometimes, it's like these are just the grunts that we're dealing with, And it's kind of hard to tackle the problem when it feels like we're having a hard time just dealing with these grunts. But that's why we gotta get the people involved and all that, you know what I'm saying? Get the masses in it, which is hard to do, but I don't know. That's just what I thought after talking to that lady there.
Oh man, no, I really appreciate you saying that. You're talking about the complexities of our community, that sometimes we see our own people, on the other side, and it does make it difficult sometimes to challenge the dominant narrative. And then Ally also brought up earlier that so many of us have many family members who are veterans or service members, and that also, it does make it harder, for us to challenge it. But you're absolutely right. That's why we need more people to come together, more voices to challenge, and not just accept these things as truth, but also, something else you said is that we're like, it's also part of that problem of the economy, right? Like that there are not a lot of there are not a lot of options. So some people have to join the military or work for the military to support their families. And so you're bringing up a very real issue around access, surviving in a colony, in a capitalist society. So I really appreciate it. So you wanted to speak to some of Noah's points, or the points that were brought up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, one of the points that he was talking about, how he was talking to that environmental lady and how she was just like, oh, this is just my job. I don't know what to tell you. A lot of them would tell me the same things whenever we would bring our concerns to them, because obviously that's what we were there for, to learn more and tell them what our concerns were. That's what they were telling us they were there for. But every time we would tell them a concern, they'd just be like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm nobody. That's one of the guys it's just those people up the ladder. So it's like, if we do put in our concerns, then who's going to really like be able to actually make changes to accommodate those? Like the rear admiral, like he's going to really care about those, you know what I mean? And even what you were saying about the pain of seeing our own people, working, when I was at the first scoping meeting, I like saw one of my teachers from middle school who was wearing a shirt with one of the logos that was on the watermarks, working for that agency. And it's just like, wow, one of the people who and I never really liked that teacher that much, but just to know that like the people who are teaching our children, people who are influencing them, and the people who we find as our mentors in our school as safe spaces are on that side, whether or not they really condone it, they're still a part of that system that is supporting it. And every time we would ask them a question, they'd either tell us that they can't answer it or tell us to go submit a comment, because they don't want to hear us telling them. They want it written in paper because it's just so much more convenient that way. And, then we went to write a comment, and on the comment, there's 5 lines for us to write our comment. And, it's like, oh, submit it before this time for consideration from us. But it's like, we deserve more than consideration. This is our land. This is our culture. This is our livelihood. These guys could really find another place. The reason why they have our place is because it's a strategic location, but this is our entire life. And so we deserve more than simply consideration. Sanamasi.
No, those are excellent points. So thank you so much. And you bring it back to this, to the, the purpose. What's the purpose of these scoping meetings, right? They're supposedly for the military to go out into the community, share information, so that we can then provide comments, which will then go into the environmental impact statement, right? And it feels like they're just checking off the boxes, like, okay, engaging the community, check. We did the scope of meetings. Okay, call for comments. Okay, these are all the comments we have, check. And then you're right. Then what happens, right, to all those comments? Where do they go? And in previous scoping periods before, for previous environmental impact statements for the base and for the firing range, thousands and thousands of comments were submitted, and you're absolutely right. How do they result in us in something that works for the people and not just for the consideration, when we know intrinsically what is best for our island and for future generations, and what we also know what our responsibilities are as descendants of this ancestral homeland. So you bring up some excellent points, and I want to just talk a little bit more about something you said, that a lot of people couldn't even answer your questions. Just encourage you to write a comment on a small piece of paper. Can we talk more about that? What is really your review of that whole process, the timing, the length we have to submit comments, the information that was provided, the way they communicated with the folks who showed up, and even you all went to all 3 of these. Were these well attended? Did they have a good representation of the community? Let's go ahead and review that. Let's take a minute, and if each of you can share, let's critique the actual scoping process, the timing, how much time we have to do this, and the methods that they used. So who would like to go first? What are some of the things they did wrong that really were a disservice to us? A lot of things. And maybe if you think they did anything right, but I know that a lot of us are out here are struggling to feel like this process is one that works in service of us. We feel that it does not. So please share your thoughts. Who would like to go first? Ally, your thoughts on the scoping process itself?
Honestly, I found it quite rushed. The fact that they only recently had the scoping meetings and the deadline is this week. All of the scoping meetings were very poorly attended. If I had $1 for every single Chamorro person or local person that I saw there that was not a part of Prutehi Litekyan or was not staff, I would not be able to pay for a full tank of gas. So yeah, there were not a lot of people, and Sol and I were at one of the presentations, and the information wasn't even accurate. The presenter admitted, like, oh, this picture is not the missile defense system that we are implementing. And when asked more questions, they would just talk themselves in circles and say, oh, you should talk to someone else. It's like they weren't educated on the topic. And when I would ask them questions, because on the first day I played dumb in order to kind of lull them into a false sense of security, when I asked them questions on the second day, they were just like, oh, I don't know. Whereas they would continue to explain as if they didn't even want to hear our own point of view. It's like they're only allowing us to submit comments to make themselves look good. It's virtue signaling, if I'm being completely honest.
Thank you so much, Ally. Soul, can you chime in next?
So yeah, I was gonna mention one of those things that Ally was saying about how on the first day we went to a presentation that was talking about the need for a missile defense. That was just one of the first presentations we saw. And on it, there's a picture of like a missile coming up and like an explosion. I was like, okay, so you're saying that there's gonna be no offensive missile technologies. So like what, just like totally unrelated, but what's that photo of a missile and an explosion? And he was like, I don't really know because I'm missile defense and this is part of the army or I don't know because there's a bunch of different like organizations. But he's like, I'm not part of that organization. I think this might be the Patriot, but you can talk to those guys about it. And we got to have some compassion for slip ups or whatever. But in a situation like this, that literally determines, like I said, our livelihood, that type of thing shouldn't be taken lightly. You're presenting this presentation on a poster board that you guys got like matted and everything. These things should have been looked over. You should be more confident in the things that you're talking about beyond just a surface level confidence of, ooh, look at me and my nice shoes and my poster boards. You know what I mean? Like Ally was saying, they would have us go in a circle saying, oh, this guy can answer your question. Then we'd go to that guy. And then he wouldn't know the answer. And then just send us right back telling us that, oh, this guy can actually answer your question. When we would ever tell them anything, like, for example, I was talking to the guy who was talking about the technology, and I was saying, Department of Defense actually said that this architecture was inadequate. This is unproven technology. So what can you tell me about that? And he'd be like, I don't really know. I didn't know that. If you guys could write a comment. They really didn't know what they were talking about. And if we would bring up anything that would kind of go against what they were saying or raise a really good critical point, they just totally shut us down and immediately interrupt us and ask us to give them a comment. Among good things that I can say about the scoping meetings, I think the only good thing that I can say is they had banana lumpia and water bottles for free.
That's great, Soul. Thank you so much. What about you, Noah? Looks like we might have lost Noah there for a sec, but oh, there you are. Noah, how about you? Any other thoughts about the quality of the scoping meetings? So any critique about that experience, that process?
I agree with what was said earlier. It's just checking a box. It's just for show. They don't give a damn what our concerns are. If they get 11, 20, 30,000 comments, they'll do the bare minimum they think they can change to make the people feel like they were considered, and then they'll still go forward with like 95% of what they're trying to do. I agree too that it was rushed, and just 3 days of scoping meetings, it's not very accessible for people. Most people, they're just out here struggling to get by. They've got their own problems to deal with. They don't feel they have the time or the energy to go to something, put comments towards something that they can't, they don't have any power to change or have any effect on. They don't, we've already been made to forget the power we, the people, have. They're just, most people's just busy with their own lives trying to get by. They feel it's going to go down no matter what. They just got to do what they can for themselves to make it. And even for the information, like, it's just a bunch of poster boards, like a high school project kind of thing. It's kind of laughable that that's their outreach, right? And even someone I was talking to at Hilton, I was questioning him on some like official government reports and stuff, and he's just like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, sorry, I don't know about that. And it didn't seem very I wouldn't call it informative as much as they're just, again, pushing their narrative. They're informing you on what they want you to know, what they want us to know or to think is the case. And yeah, it's just checking a box, checking a box.
I really appreciate you saying that. Some of us call it like a dog and pony show or like a show and tell. Like they just show up, they just give a few bullet points. But then, you know, you're all bringing up really important points of access, right? A lot of people are very busy. They are caught up in the day-to-day survival. But also we are still in recovery from Super Typhoon Mewar, and a lot of folks are still struggling. And so it does feel extremely insensitive and unfair that this whole process is being pushed forward and so quickly. You're all absolutely right. Like the scoping meetings the 3 scoping meetings, just 3 are taking place just within days of the deadline of the public comment period. 3 days is not accessible. I also think their locations were very tricky. They chose private property areas. Not everybody's comfortable going to the Hilton. Not everybody's, gonna go to the mall on a weeknight, right? And then Agate, all the way in Agate, at the Seaside Community Center, which is not really the most visible community center. You all brought up a lot of good points, but also the cost of production. Sol, you brought that up. They obviously spent a lot of money to hand out things, to produce a bunch of glossy posters and images, but there wasn't really a lot of substance behind them. And you've all brought up the same experience of coming with informed questions, with your own research, even citing government reports that they couldn't even speak to. And all they would suggest is that you just write it down in a comment. And so it felt very performative. It felt like it was not sincere, substantive, but more just a performance to check off the boxes. You all brought up so many great critiques of the process, so many great things about what you experienced. And I just really want to thank you all so much for all of your time and your energy to going to all of the scoping meetings last week. You, as well as the others who joined in, for carrying the signs, the banners, for carrying these important messages, because as was mentioned earlier by Noah, visibility is so critical. If it was just one point of view being pushed at these venues, we'd have a problem. And so the visibility of the counter message is so critical to bring voices together. Any final thoughts as we are coming, sorry, there's a plane going by. Any final thoughts as we're kind of coming to the close of the program? Any final thoughts before we wrap up about your experience from last week, attending the scoping meetings, or even, your thoughts on how our community is now going to prepare to submit comments, and then we go into the next phase. So after this, then they're going to develop the environmental impact statement, and then we'll have to review that again and comment that again. Any other thoughts, either on the recent experiences and the rest of the process? Sol, go ahead.
I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's one of the military planes flying right over right now. I don't know if you guys can hear that. They always come up, and people always hear them in phone calls. They come up like literally like every 20, 30 minutes. But anybody who's listening to this, I cannot urge you enough to, take the time to put in a comment. It won't take anything longer than like 15 to 20 minutes. There's all these resources out here for you guys to figure out which talking points to take on. And, it doesn't seem like a big deal right now when, it's all just on your phone or your computer, and it's all just like on the news. You don't see it straight up into your face until it's too late. And you got to realize the weight of this situation. And, like Noah was saying, we forget the power that we have as the people. And I cannot urge you guys enough to take it, tap into that power and use it, and, use your heart and use your mind and think critically about these things, and have compassion for, how anxious a lot of us are going into this, because, war is a really big deal. And like we were opening this podcast by saying, there's so much tragedy around our culture already with our experiences in war that can make this really difficult to talk about. We don't want to say we don't want defense. And that's why we need to look into this and educate ourselves to think critically about what a defense system means.
Excellent, Sol. Thank you so much. Who would like to go next with some closing thoughts?
Percent with what she said about it. Don't seem like a big deal now till things is going down and all of a sudden it's a huge problem, you know? And we got to get ahead of it because, again, there's a historical record. The U.S. thinks it needs to go fight some people to better its position. It's going to go and do that. And I have no doubt that if they can scuffle with China a little bit real quick to, you know, do what they got lives or offer up whatever military's out here, they don't give a dang. So please, to whoever's watching this, talk to those around you. You know, you don't need to be an expert on anything to have an opinion on stuff. You know, we are the people. Everything, literally everything in society comes from all of us putting in our part. So we have every right to run our mouth, whatever we don't agree with, whatever we question. And real change that will benefit us will only ever come when we get together, organize ourselves, and start running our mouth, making our will be known, you know, asserting our will, holding the politicians' feet to the fire. Because if we just show up for election time and then let them go about their way, ain't nothing gonna happen. And you know, we're just, I don't know what, we're waiting on a dream or something. We gotta wake up and do things ourselves.
Thank you so much, Noah. Ally, closing thoughts.
So this is directly to my generation. I know that the world seems hopeless. We have for so long been oppressed by the US. We've had our land taken away from us. We've had our peace of mind taken away from us. We've had our right to self-determination taken away from us. And I know that a lot of us think that nothing can be done about it. But if you leave a comment, if you try to speak up, just get involved in any way that you can. You can even listen to this podcast episode while you're working out. That's usually how I listen to my podcast episodes. Just something, anything helps, anything other than sitting still at home, because by sitting still, you are surrendering to the destruction. It doesn't take much, just 15 minutes, if anything. I know that a lot of people have a lot more free time than I do, and I've had time to leave a comment. So just please leave a comment, leave your thoughts as a way to show how much you love our culture, our island, our people. I refuse to see the Chamorro people become more of a diaspora than they already are.
Thank you so much, Ally. You've all brought up so many wonderful points. First of all, you know, I just want to say this call to action to enter wherever you're at. You don't have to come out and hold a sign. You don't have to go to the legislature to offer testimony. It can be writing a letter to the editor. It could be writing a comment. It could be having a conversation. It could be sharing this podcast. You're absolutely right. Wherever we are at, we can do something. We can contribute. It could be sharing the posts. It could be talking to somebody else about the concerns we discussed in this podcast, and that's great. And also to come at it from a place of love. Ally just said the love of our land and people, calling folks to wake up. As Noah and Soul said, this is really important that we can't just stay still and stay on the sidelines, because if we stay silent, then we're siding with the side of injustice. So I appreciate you all making time for tonight, or for this conversation, and making time to go to the scoping meetings, to stand in solidarity, to protest the continued and expanded militarization of our island, but also to fight for a better future for our island. But something I think that we all talked about is the importance to fight back this dominant narrative of national security and that war is inevitable. We know that war doesn't have to be inevitable, that peace and diplomacy is possible. We need our leaders to demand that. And we need to take a minute to ask ourselves, you know, what genuine security means to us, not national security, which we know is part of an imperial context, right? An imperial colonial context and a war context, but genuine security. What does that mean to all of us? You know, living without the threat of war in our homelands, living in our homelands where our ancestors lived without them being desecrated, living without the threat of contaminated water, air, and soil, living in a place that can guarantee food security, education, healthcare, housing. This is really the society we should strive toward, and not one that's waged in war. And so, and again, we've all talked about in this conversation how we haven't been the instigators of that war, but we've been caught up in it, and we refuse to do that, to be a stomping ground and collateral damage for war again. We refuse to be a first-rate community. So I want to thank all of you so much for making the time for this conversation, for all the time and energy you gave last week, and for the things you do every single day for our people in our island. Sainamasi, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening out there. Again, please check out our toolkit. We've got a great toolkit. It's got tips for how to submit comments. It has some really great talking points, a lot of which were discussed in this podcast. And it also has a long list of really great news articles, columns, a lot of great, even a video that was produced by the Whānau Coalition, a conversation that took place a couple months ago. A lot of really great resources there. Please check it out. The deadline to submit comments is August 18th. And August 18th, we're also having a peace protest. We're still trying to find the location, but by the time this podcast airs, we'll have a location. So please look out for that. We'll have our peace protest on Friday, the same day that comments are due, Friday, August 18th in the afternoon. So again, please check out our toolkit. The link will be included here, but also it's in our link tree in our Instagram. And it could also be found, let's see if I could just read it real quick. I don't know if that helps, but it'll also be found at bit.ly/PLSR360 toolkit. Okay, so Sainamasi, everybody. As Sol mentioned, and as others mentioned, sometimes it's very frustrating. It feels like, we don't know where our comments go, but at the same time, it's so important. It's so critical that we submit a comment, that we challenge the narrative, that we critique the process, that we demand for peace and diplomacy, and that we say that we deserve better, and it has to be guaranteed for all future generations. So thank you all so much. Sainamasi, everybody. Take care. Hasta adios.